All right, we are live. So tonight we've got Sirens of the Supernatural, 3 guests at once. So we're going to start with introductions, and I'm going to go with Ryan first. So Ryan, tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, I'm Ryan McCoy. I've lived in the Appalachian Mountains my entire life. Had a deep history of paranormal, folklore, supernatural type stuff. My grandmother was Cherokee Indian, of course, so you have that type of background. And was raised in the mountains, so that brought up a love for not only watching scary movies, scaring the crap out of each other on weekends, and so me and my fellow podcasters with Sirens of the Supernatural, we got together and wanted to kind of spread that type of knowledge and that type of lifestyle to let people know, hey, there's a lot more out there. I'm actually working with marketing right now. I'm in sales, which means I get to meet a lot of very interesting people, and I hear some pretty cool stories sometimes. But our passion for paranormal, for supernatural, for the unknown, the weird, the strange, that's something that intrigues us and fascinates us, and that's what we're all about. So, we appreciate you having us on your show, and we love sharing stories, and we love having people on our podcast to share their stories, because it's all about knowledge. It's all about commonality and just getting things out there. And plus, getting into this, you'll realize there's a lot more people involved in this than what you really think. You start going to some of these different conferences and these different Halloween themed or paranormal themed things. And Rhonda and all of us got to go to a few this past year, and it's unbelievable at the amount of people that show up for these type of things, especially here locally.
Yeah.
So that really excites us, and we like.
You guys have a whole bunch of festivals down around where you guys do. So yeah, it's a target-rich environment.
Yeah, we've got a lot of different experiences. We like going to research different things. We like finding out. We love learning new things and experiencing new things. We love learning fresh perspective and ideas. And it's all about knowing, because knowledge is power. And one of the reasons I really got into this is because some of the things that we talk about, some of the things we do are scary. And so when I was younger, I was like, okay, if you find out more about it, it will become less scary, because it's scary because you just know the surface. But then I find out, okay, well, sometimes the more you find out about it, the more scary it becomes. So some things you just kind of want to pull back and maybe go in a different direction. But it's still all interesting, and that's kind of what my interest is. And I'm sure Rhonda and Lindsay feel the same way, and I'm sure there's somewhere, you kind of feel something similar, but I'll let them go ahead and jump in, because I don't want to talk a whole lot. So.
Well said, Ryan. I'll jump in. I'm Rhonda. Ryan and I are first cousins. And so we grew up in the crazy McCoy clan. And like he said, there were a lot of superstitions, folklore that were passed down to us. And we heard pretty much since we were little tykes, knee high. And so we've always had kind of an interest in that. And I think with our podcast, it gives us a chance to cover a variety of topics, but we kind of always end up coming back to the Appalachian folklore and some of those traditions that are getting lost with newer generations, maybe not knowing or hearing about them. And it was a very rural area. When I graduated high school, I moved away and didn't end up coming back to the mountains until about 8 years ago. And so, just love the mountains, couldn't wait to get back. It's in your blood if you're raised in the mountains, and got back closer to family. And actually it was another one of our cousins that got us involved in a podcast. It was his idea. He was like, hey, you guys could do a podcast and I'll produce it. Yeah. And we're like, okay. So we just kind of jumped in and hit the ground running, and we've been doing it since October of 2023. We've loved it. We've just had a ball as a family, and getting our extended family involved too, going places and researching, and just, it's been a lot of fun for us. And Lindsay is my daughter, and she's my youngest daughter, and she's always kind of had a love for the supernatural and paranormal that I think she got from me. Maybe she's my scary movie buddy. She's always been, like-minded in that way. And so we're like, let's get Lindsay on board and let's go with it. So we have, and like Ron said, we're learning a lot. We're meeting a lot of great people. And yes, I was very surprised when we started thinking about names for the podcast. There are so many paranormal podcasts. Well, there's tons of podcasts, but the paranormal genre is just, and so we really started realizing, wow, we do need a niche.
Yeah.
And so we kind of stuck with what we knew, and that's what we've done. And I am in the Western North Carolina mountains. So we're all in different states, actually. Ryan's Tennessee, I'm North Carolina, and Lindsay lives in Virginia. And I actually work for the local school district superintendent. So you can imagine, after Hurricane Helene, it's been a while getting back to normal up here. But I think we are finally getting back to normal. And so love the mountains and love my family. And we get to do, the best of both worlds with the podcast. So Lindsay, I'll kick it to you.
Well, hi, I'm Lindsay. Like Mom said, I'm her daughter, the youngest one on the podcast, but maybe one with the most to say sometimes. So I won't say too much here, but what I will say is that for the podcast, it's been a really good time. I've listened to podcasts for years and years now, and always paranormal and true crime podcasts are my favorite. So when they said they wanted to start one, I was like, well, why not? I guess let's see what happens. And we've had a really good time. I get to produce it, so I get to add in all the
What
fun
happened
videos.
to the other? What happened to the other producer?
Well, you want to take that, Ron?
Yeah, it was our cousin, and me and him have had similar. We was raised together. We was neighbors, and we watched scary movies together. We was walking the mountains at 3:00 in the morning together. We was out of school, just kind of having something to do. He recently passed away.
Oh, goodness. My bad.
He was involved in a lot of different things.
Yeah.
He was involved in our podcast very heavily, and was the producer and helped a lot for like the first year.
He got us started.
A lot of other things going on, and he's like, "Look, guys, I've got to step back. You guys can take the reins. You guys kind of, because we kind of all taught each other. They're much better at certain things than I am. Hey, look, just like my dad said, I'm good at running my mouth. That's the one thing that I've been good at. So that's why I'm in marketing and sales." And talking on a podcast, kind of my, hey, that just falls right up my alley. So, but yeah, he did recently just pass away.
I'm sorry. Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, and he wasn't much older than us.
Yeah,
but he was a good guy. But this is still part of somewhat of his legacies, because he's actually one of the ones. Because we got to talking one night, and he's like, "Hey, let's go ahead and do this." We're like, "Yeah." It's like, "Okay." And it's like, "Hey, let's get Rhonda." And we're like, "Hey, let's get Lindsay." And we're like, "Oh, this is going to be awesome." And then the next thing you know, here we go. And, this is like our, pretty much our third season. And it's like, it's pretty amazing how, how things have turned out, and the amount of things that we've learned and grown, and how many people that we've met, so that's what happened. But like I said, it's not a bad thing, because this is something that he was passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
We've all been passionate about our whole life, but this is a way that we can actually express that.
Absolutely.
So, it's positive. It's a positive thing.
So producer Lindsay.
Yes.
So you produce this now, and what else?
Yeah, I try to do him justice. I really try to do, as creative as I can be, and add sound effects and videos. And I actually teach art, so I'm interested in that kind of stuff anyways. We just have a good time. Honestly, I always say, I'm just here for a good time. I love talking about this kind of stuff and meeting new people, and I'm excited to be on your podcast tonight. So thank you for
Appreciate
having
it.
us.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, the one question that I ask all guests is, all right, so, and I need to figure out a better way to describe it, but either way, it is what it is. So everyone's got a gateway drug to this high strangeness, madness that we deal with here and on this podcast. So mine was Bigfoot. That was my gateway drug to the supernatural, paranormal, cryptid space, right? So what for you guys was your gateway drug to this whole thing? I mean, like, you know what I mean?
Ryan,
I
you want to
guess
go first? Oh, okay. Go ahead, Lindsay.
I was gonna say, for me, I think I know it's not really a cryptid, but I'm gonna say aliens because I feel like I have
Same thing.
always been into aliens. Even as a little kid, I was like low-key convinced that I might be one.
She was.
Mom, do you remember that?
Yes.
I was like low-key convinced. And then I know this is gonna sound weird, but I'm an Aquarius. I don't like spout horoscope stuff all the time, and I won't on here, but with Aquarius, we're kind of the weirdos, and a lot of times it's associated with aliens. So I feel like it just comes full circle.
Yeah.
Like I still might be
I mean,
one.
they're talking. We're going into the age of Aquarius here soon.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
yeah, I'm a Pisces, so I kind of get it.
Gotcha. Yeah.
What about you, Rhonda?
For me, and I'm a Taurus, by the way. Just so I throw that out there.
That's my wife is a Taurus as well. So
So for me, I think of what just sparked my interest from the get-go was Ryan mentioned our great-grandmother. We had our maternal great-grandmother and our maternal grandmother. We're very superstitious. And there were a lot of us first cousins, and we all kind of seemed to gather at their house. For a good while, our great grandmother lived with our grandmother. And so whenever they needed all of us kids to be quiet, they would sit us in a room with our great grandmother, and she would tell us ghost stories.
wow.
And she would tell stories that she told for true. And when you're 4 and 5 and 6 years old, I mean, she could hold a whole room full of youngsters. We'd be enthralled. We'd be so quiet, and she could make the hair on the back of your neck stand up with her stories. And I think ever since then, I have just been interested in everything paranormal. I think that mine are more ghostly, not cryptids, not aliens, but more, paranormal in that regard.
Paranormal,
Ghosts and knocking spirits. She would tell us stories about knocking spirits and just different things like that. So that was kind of my gateway.
Good. All right, Ryan.
Well, mine's a little bit different. I had to, like a lot of mine and Rhonda's experiences were very similar because, like I said, the same grandmother, same type of family. But what really got me into it, this is a little bit more on the darker side of it. Well, when I was 4, I was visiting family in Missouri, and we done the little, hey, we're sleeping on the floor. We'll just throw some mattresses down, or sorry, not mattress. We just throw a blanket down, a pillow. I happened to wake up at like 3:00 in the morning. Every light in the house is off. It's a 2-story house, and I wake up and The Exorcist is on. So I look up. I'm 4 years old. I see Linda Blair's hair spinning around, and that mortified me. I'm in this house, and they always try to scare you, to get you to be quiet. Oh, it's haunted. Don't go in the upstairs room on the left, whatever. And so it terrified me for a while, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm scared of it because I don't know about it. So then I start doing more research, and then once you start going down that rabbit hole, then you start getting into not just demonology, you get into occult, you get into witchcraft, you get into a lot of different spirituality type things. So that was my basis to kind of get into it. So that took me along a lot of different avenues. And then, of course, the older I got, and then, Mama starts telling these scary stories. And then, of course, we'll have to do an episode once we find out more on the gobbledygook, which is another story that they told us, whether it was made up or not. You know, I think it is some sort of alien slash skinwalker slash some kind of jello monster with one eye that has teeth that can come. It's basically the blob with an eye and teeth. Yeah. And it can come get you anytime, day or night, and it can just appear out of anything, and it will come get you if you're mean.
It's just to keep you in line.
You know, they told that for truth as well. So, you know, when you're 4 and 5 years old, you don't know. You're living in the top of the mountain, and it's the blackest black and the darkest dark, and you're in the middle of the boonies, and you don't know what's right. And they keep telling these, oh, yeah, you need to be good. You can't go out after this. And you're like, so they made it very, very clear that there was stuff out there.
Yeah, Santa's not going to put coal in your stocking.
Yeah,
this blob with the teeth and eyes.
Yeah,
going to come and get you.
Was, you know, and like I told people at work, you know, some of us had to be mean to get coal in the stocking.
Yeah,
that's how we heated our wood coal stoves.
Right. You're like, okay, I'll take the coal.
Yeah, we needed the coal. So
and it was coal mining country where we lived too.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but like I said, you know, just information, just to trying to find out more about it so it would become less scary. But certain things actually made it more terrifying than what you really needed to be. So you're like, okay, maybe I know enough about that subject. Let's, you know, hey, let's talk about the wood bugger or Bigfoot, or didn't UFOs seem pretty cool? What's ET like? So,
right, for sure.
In our first episode, our first full-length episode, we kind of gave a little bit of history about like why we got into it, how we got into it, and then we shared one of the spooky stories our great-grandma used to tell. And so, yeah, if anybody's interested, they can go back and definitely listen to that episode. It's not very long, but it gives a lot of history about our family and different things. Absolutely. And why Ryan was such a weird kid.
Right. So what are some of your favorite stories from Appalachia?
Well,
because there's a lot of them, I get it, but
there's a lot.
And depending on where you're at in
true, because the Appalachians stretch from like Georgia up to
because West Virginia stories are going to be a little different than like, you know, Tennessee stories. I mean, I'm sure they rhyme, but they're probably a little different. But
and when you get up into like the different, very remote parts, you know, each holler, each little nook and cranny has its own. They may have, you know, their own unique cryptids, or it's
well,
really
they do, absolutely,
a wide gamut of things. I think.
I'm gonna plug a little something for a buddy of mine who's and he's actually gonna be on the podcast soon. And I wouldn't say he's a buddy, but either way, an acquaintance. Either way, he's got a movie called Dark Holler, and if you guys have never watched it, you need to.
Ooh, sounds good. Yeah,
it's pretty amazing. There's like. And you brought up so it's Ryan's fault that I'm bringing this up because he brought up The Exorcist. So they literally do like an exorcism on film. Oh, like you see it happen in a river. It's crazy. It's legit. And then it turns into this. He figured he was going to go do like a 1 hour segment documentary, but no, this turned into like a 5-day affair. And it's got 5 different episodes. So write it down. It's called Dark Holler. You'll love it.
Okay, cool. We love scary movies.
Oh yeah, and it's in West Virginia. That's where it's
it's set in West Virginia. Oh, that's
cool. I mean, it's not a movie, it's a
documentary. Yeah.
And
those scare me more than
horror
movies do.
It's got you know, demonic possession, it's got occult, it's got stuff with Lilith. It's got ghosts. It kind of fills all the
checks all the boxes.
Yeah, so either way. Your favorite stories from, you know, maybe growing up or whatever. Just have at it.
Ron, you wanna
Well, actually, I was going to talk a little bit about woodbugger because basically that's the Appalachian version of basically Bigfoot,
Bigfoot, right?
Sasquatch. And that's what I was doing earlier. I took some notes because it's based out of Norton, Virginia, which is about 30 minutes from where I was raised on a mountain called Brushy Ridge, which then you cross Booger Ridge, which Booger is kind of like another term
Of
for
course. Why would they name it Booger
or
Ridge?
goblin. It's just a scary
Yeah.
place. So it's kind of cool in the backstory of Norton because there's an independent city formerly known as Princess Flat, and it was part of the wilderness trails that were blazed by none other than Daniel Boone.
Mm-hmm.
But there were a lot of Bigfoot sightings, which they adapted to now woodbugger. And there's even restaurants and you can buy different kind of paraphernalia and things there. And then when you go on to High Knob, they actually have a recreation area near Flag Rock, and they have a statue of what people have seen was presumably Bigfoot or woodbugger looks like.
Yeah.
And there's a sanctuary there to try to keep woodbugger safe and his habitat for him and his family. And another one, and this is a little bit more familiar because, me and my dad, we talk about things like this all the time. And of course, people think we're crazy because we believe in Bigfoot. But he has some friends that, are near a place called the Breaks Interstate Park in Hayside, Virginia. And he said they was talking one day and his friend was asking some of the forest rangers there, so, hey, you ever see any Bigfoots? Are they around here? He said, no. And this is what took him for a loop because the forest ranger said, no, they're not on this side of the ridge. They're down on the other side where the river comes out because that's where the trout stuff's at. He says, you're not going to find them on this side this time of year. And the ranger come flat out and told him, said, no, you're not going to find them here right now. They're going to be over there. So whenever you talk to different forest rangers, whether it be, for the national parks, if you talk to the right ones, they'll tell you because they're like, hey, look, you're either going to believe me or you're not.
Right, right.
And there's a place right up from that where my dad lives that my stepmother told me about. They was out one day and they just happened to be walking. And it's not far from where he lives. And I've been begging him for a year to take me to show me. But he kind of thinks, something bad may happen because they know I'm gonna go straight up, up in there and look at it.
Yeah.
They was out and you know how you hear, that Bigfoot or woodbugger, they throw rocks or they take timbers and they knock and things like that to send a message, hey, you don't need to be here to scare people off. But there's a lot of that goes on about 5 miles from my dad's house.
That's awesome.
And I'm wanting to go research that, and if I do, of course it'll be on an episode.
Yeah, just do it. I love it.
If I make it back to tell the tale of
you will. Just be respectful. That's all you gotta do.
Right. And I'm one of the guys I would just go like super early in the morning before the sun rises. I would get up in a big tree somewhere with some cameras and stuff. That way, I'm there before anything really gets going, even though they're probably nocturnal, and just have to sit there and just be quiet, just to see what you see.
I'm telling you, you're not going to get pictures.
Yeah.
You're not.
Yeah.
I don't even take a camera anymore. I mean, I do, but at this point, I'm like, it's not even, it's you're stressing yourself about nothing. We're just go out and have the encounter, right? Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to hurt it, even if I saw it. I want to know it exists. And I wouldn't even tell really nobody where I saw the particular place at. I mean, there's going to be certain areas, but I think that of course they have places they stay, but I kind of think they migrate according to, the season, some of them, the fruits and things like that. And that's why you see them certain things. And it's kind of funny. And Rhonda's brother Steve, me and him have talked about this, and me and my dad, whenever everything kind of shut down for COVID, I got this big idea that I was going to treat it like a, kind of like a murder spree or like a mass murderer or something. I was like, okay, I want to take this a certain area and put the little thumbtacks on a map and be like, okay,
Yeah.
this time of year, and I was going to do it, and I was going to say, I'm going to have it so exact that I can say, hey, if you're here at October 6th at 7:00 at this particular place, you're going to see Bigfoot walk across this road.
So,
but it just never did come across to that. But
so
I think,
where's the place that's by your dad's house again?
do what now?
What is the area that's by your father's
Well,
house?
he lives in Coburn, Virginia.
Okay, so let's.
Yeah, and he lives on basically a place called Sandy Ridge. Now, the place that we're talking about is another ridge that is right across from him, which is about 5 miles from where he lives. But it's all right there in the area, because when you go from Flatwoods, you go to Coburn, and then basically Hayside and the High Knob, it's all within like right there in that certain mountain ranges, right? So they're within like an hour of each other. So it could be a group, it could be something that, that's just the way they travel, but it's all right there in the same region. So
yeah, so if there's a tool called the Bigfoot Mapping Project. If you guys have never looked at it,
I've heard of it.
oh, it's cool. And I'm going to be interviewing the guy who runs it here in the next few, like later this month. But yeah, if you look down by Bristol, because that's sort of where you're at, right?
Well, it's a little further, because Bristol's about a little over an hour hour and 20 minutes from where we're at.
I mean, just right over into Tennessee,
Tennessee,
like Johnson City, Kingsport, there's sightings all over the place there.
Oh, wow.
And then in going from Virginia, Lewis Fork wilderness area, there's some sightings there. And then just check it out, and it's a cool resource. On the East Coast, though, of all the places, Western Pennsylvania and Eastern Ohio are like the hot spots.
Wow.
But yeah, get on there and take a look at it. Just food for thought.
Yeah.
And there's things up there, like I said, when you live in the mountains. I mean, I've been around, I've seen, people say there's not Black Panthers. I've seen a Black Panther in person. I've seen mountain lions. I've seen,
right.
But there was one night that I was out and I heard something, and I mean it made a sound I've never heard in the mountains before. And I've lived there my whole life. I mean, I'm talking, I walked through, I was never scared to go through the woods because I was just familiar with everything. But there was this one night that I heard this noise, and I just kind of hunkered down in a ditch and just wanted to listen to try to hear it. And I heard it made a few noises. It probably got as close as maybe 30 yards from me. And it was nighttime, And the reason why I didn't want to do a whole lot, because I just happened to be out walking. I didn't have any kind of weapon or anything with me. I was just walking up the road for a few minutes just because I was bored. And then all of a sudden, that's when it always happens. So I'm just like, okay, there's something here. I just need to kind of sit down. So if it is tracking me, it's going to have to do a little bit better than follow my footsteps through my sin. Right. But like I said, I heard a noise. I've heard mountain lions. I've heard panthers. We even used to call mountain lions in. And I remember my grandmother, she would fuss at us because as kids, you got familiar with how things sound. And a Black Panther would sound either like a baby crying or like a woman screaming. Mm-hmm. And it also made like its natural animal sound. So we would get out there at nighttime, and we got to be very familiar with sounding like wolves and mountain lions and panthers. And you can call it, and we would call it in within a couple 100 yards, and it would start squalling back. Yeah. And then my grandmother would be like, no, y'all need to stop. Y'all need to get your hind end in the house right now. Can
eat you. Yeah. You better stop.
Yeah. And, but like I said, this thing, it just made this weird sound I've never heard before. And it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Mm-hmm. To this day, I have no clue what it was. But it had to be something, I don't know what a Bigfoot sounds like, or a wood booger or something. But it was something that was just not familiar with that area.
Yeah, gotcha.
So it was strange.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of what I caught with wood booger and some of the other things there. But there's going to be further investigations made as soon as the weather breaks, and
Sure.
I get brave enough to go sit in a tree for a couple of days.
Hey, I'll come down and we can go out together.
There you go. Hey, we'll go to Wood Booger Restaurant. We'll grab us,
Okay.
grab us a meal. Buy some food. I'll take you. We'll go to Flag Rock and kind of check out. Yeah, we'll make a day out of it.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
I love that about Ryan. He always makes everything fun.
Hey, you know, that's what life is. If you can't enjoy it, what's the use of being there?
That's right. That's exactly right. I think earlier I said maternal grandmothers. It's paternal. It's our dad's family. Our grandmother had 7 boys.
Wow.
Yeah. No girls.
Any
boys.
any McCoys that you're related to possibly? There's a lot of McCoys. It's pretty, but any family in Oklahoma?
I don't know that I've heard of any
Okay.
McCoys
Just
in
wondering.
I was stationed in Oklahoma at one time, so I was there.
Okay.
I was in the
Yeah,
Army.
no, I have a buddy that I was in the Army with that
Oh,
is from Oklahoma, but
wow.
And
And
his-
he's a McCoy.
he's a McCoy.
How
So
about that? We spread everywhere.
yeah,
We're everywhere.
everywhere.
And that's a great segue to what I was going to cover, because I've always been really into like ancestry and genealogy and our family ancestry. And we are from the Mackay clan, the Scottish Mackay clan. And so I love those traditions that they brought with them. I love to research those and study about those. And there are so many ancient eerie rituals in the Appalachians with roots in Celtic and
Mhm.
Scottish and English traditions. And so we had, a lot of those, they kind of merge and combine. And in our family, like Ron said, our great grandmother was part Cherokee. And so we had not only the Celtic traditions, but we also had the Native American traditions that kind of wove itself into the traditions they brought. But one of the most mysterious and weird traditions that I've researched that most people don't know about, it was called sin eating. Now, it's gone out of practice now, but it used to be a really serious part of life in the region, especially the remote regions where our family settled when they came over. So we did an episode on this, and I went back to my notes, and I thought this would be something really interesting to talk about, because a lot of people
giving me ideas. That's all I have to
Yes.
say.
A lot of people outside the Appalachian Mountains have never heard of this tradition. So what exactly is it? Well, it's a practice that involved a person that was known as the sin eater, and they would be hired during wakes or funerals. And the individual's task was to take on the sins of the deceased. And the idea was behind it that consuming a symbolic meal, and sometimes it would be a cake or a death cake or bread, that the sin eater, that individual, would kind of absorb the sins of the departed, right? And this would ensure that the soul could find peace in the afterlife. But the ritual wasn't just, a quirky local custom. It actually spanned centuries before. It was practiced across Scotland, Ireland, Wales, and the surrounding regions. And over time, it made its way, across the ocean to the Appalachians. And believe it or not, this is really interesting. So there were reports of sin eating still taking place, this ritual still taking place in parts of North Carolina, West Virginia, and Virginia up until the 1950s.
Probably happening now still.
It may be. So like we said, the roots run a lot deeper than you might think. And even today, or even when Ron and I were growing up, they had what they called a wake. When a person died, they would lay the body out in the home, and the family and community would come to the home and sit up all night with the deceased, right? But and you hear of hiring professional mourners, in medieval England and all of this stuff. But it was actually kind of more than that. And when that ritual came over, it kind of blended as well with the Catholic rites of absolution, where the priest would forgives the sins of someone close to death, right? So that kind of got blended in there too. But here's the twist. In the case of sin eating, the death was often unexpected. So if you had somebody that you knew was going to die, and you could call the priest and have the priest come in and, say the prayer and absolve them of their sins, that was one thing. But if someone died unexpectedly, well, the priest didn't get to visit. No one, got to come and absolve them of their sins. So what they did was they would hire, the grieving family would hire a person called the sin eater to perform the ritual that was seen as a really crucial part of their grieving process. To them, it wasn't just a strange, weird act. It was a way, to ensure that the soul of their loved one would go on to heaven and not be tormented in hell. So the actual ritual, though, is kind of the weird, spooky part. A family member or community member would go out and they would seek out the sin eater. Okay. And when the sin eater arrived, let's just say it was a sight you wouldn't forget. They were often dressed head to toe in black. Oftentimes their head was covered as well. Their presence just kind of added to the chilling, somber atmosphere, right? So get this picture in your mind. In absolute silence, the sin eater would approach the body, and the meal, like the bread or the death cake, would either be held above the body, or it was placed near or even on the deceased, sometimes on the chest, sometimes on the face. And the meal itself was believed to embody or absorb the sins of the departed.
Right.
Okay. So then the sin eater would step up, and by eating the meal, it was believed that the sin eater literally took on the deceased person's sins. It was though the sins transferred through from the body to the food to the sin eater, and hopefully allowed the departed to rest in peace. And the sin eater would often say a prayer that would accompany after he ate the meal, he or she ate the meal. And the prayer would go something like this. This was the prayer. I give easement and rest now to thee, dear man or woman. Come not down the lanes or in our meadows, and for thy peace I pawn my own soul. So that was the prayer that this person would say. But after this ritual was performed, the sin eater didn't leave unscathed. Once it was over, the family, the community shunned this person, turned them out of the home. They were ostracized by the community. The sins they had consumed, it was believed, followed them and made them impure and unclean, right? And would doom them to an eternal life in hell. So think about that. Because of this, they were forced to live in isolation, okay, often away from the rest of the community. People wouldn't make eye contact with them. They wouldn't greet them. Even churchgoers, okay, looked down on them. So it had to be a harsh, lonely life. So why would anyone do that?
Yeah.
That was
outside of the going to hell. And I mean, I don't mind going to church, but if people just don't leave me alone, not come around, I'm kind of cool with that.
I don't disagree. I would also do that, but
well, see, I couldn't live like that. I'm a real people person. I gotta have people around. I want everybody to like me, all that stuff. So it was just so unfathomable, to me that people actually would do that. But I found out in researching that the answer was usually in desperation, because they were often outcasts anyway. They were the poor, maybe they were undesirables, alcoholics, beggars, just the socially undesirable people who might need a little money or some food. Yeah. And they would take on this role knowing full well the price that they would pay, right?
Right.
So I have always been intrigued by that. And I found a book, if anyone's interested in this fascinating piece of Appalachian folklore, there's a book out there called Last Sin Eater by Francine Rivers. And the book was actually made into a movie, and it came out in 2007. It's a really good movie if you haven't seen it. It's just one of those that flew under the radar. And it tells the story of some Welsh immigrants who moved to the Appalachians and were practicing the ritual of sin eating. So I highly recommend that for anybody that's interested if you want to learn more. And that one intrigues me because it's just a testament to the strange blend of all of these traditions and the folklore that ended up here in the Appalachian Mountains, decades and generations before we were even born. And I had not heard of that growing up. That was one that I had not heard of growing up. And when I, started digging into it, I was like, this is our neck of the woods. This was going on, in our neck of the woods, and I had never heard it. So it's a little bit, it's eerie and it's a little bit macabre, but it's very interesting, and it's part of our, of the history of the region. So that was one that I wanted to bring out because I feel like a lot of those kinds of stories are getting lost.
There's another representation of the Sin Eater on mainstream TV now. If the series Outlander. If you've never watched it, I want to say it's like season 5. It's whenever they're in Fraser's Ridge, which is Western North Carolina, Scots, they're all there is a Sin Eater that's part of their
I forgot about that.
There's a Sin Eater that's part of their colony or whatever you want to call it, the Fraser's Ridge. So it's pretty weird. I had never heard of it until then, and I was like, what is this?
What is
so I totally understand your because I'll probably do an episode on these folks at this point now too. So just when I'm looking down, guys, just know I take a lot of notes. So
we do that too.
Well, I guess I'll jump in and I'll speak a little bit. I have to say first, though, I don't know if you guys can hear, the wind is blowing so hard at my house. It's like creaking my house. Yeah. And I've had to mute myself a couple times because when it blows like that and it creaks the house, Champ, my dog, is like he's getting real mad. He's pissed because he doesn't know what it is. So he starts like growling and barking. And he was like growling in his sleep at it. And I was like, dude, I've got to.
Well, how far north are you in Virginia?
So I'm actually in Abingdon, Virginia. Okay. It's not very far north. It's not far from Bristol, which is where you were talking about.
I didn't know if there were storms down there. I know there's some bad storms in Maryland tonight. But I don't know if it's swinging that down south. So it's just
possibly. And it wasn't doing it this morning. It just started around like 7:00, and I was thinking, okay, this can't be happening when I'm trying to podcast because it's loud to me. I don't know if you guys can.
No, we can't. I can't hear it at all.
Okay, good. But I actually am going to talk about Abingdon a little bit today. I love living in Abingdon. It's the cutest little town in Virginia. Bristol is the closest city. It's a little bit bigger, but Abingdon has its own special vibe. It was founded in about 1778, so very, very old town. And we even have a building called the Tavern that was one of the first buildings that was built, and it's still there, and it's a restaurant, and you can go get a drink. It's supposedly haunted. Most of the old buildings on Main Street have some kind of ghost story or haunted or
sounds like my type of place. Just saying.
And it's the cutest little town. But I'm going to talk about a couple of stories. The first one is from the Martha Washington Inn and Spa. It's called the Hotel and Spa now, but it started out as a girls' college in the town of. It's like right in the heart of Abingdon. And during the Civil War, it served as a hospital for this. Either side, soldiers would come and go, and a soldier named John Stoves was grievously injured, and so some of his fellow soldiers took him down. There's a cave house because Daniel Boone, when he came through, stayed in a cave, got rid of some of these wolves that were in this cave. And there's actually, I don't think it exists anymore, but there used to be a tunnel that went underground from the cave house to the Martha Washington, and I think across the way to the Barter Theater that does like plays, and it's still pretty renowned in town today. And I always wanted to go down in these tunnels so bad. But because we actually stayed at the haunted room in the Martha Washington when we first started.
Mhm.
And I forget who we asked about it, but they were like, no, it's filled in now. But I kind of feel like they just say that. Like, I kind of want to know, like, is it really, or is it just a liability at this point? I don't care. I would go down. But they carried him down through this tunnel system to the Martha Washington, and they put him in room 403. And so there was a young student named Beth that cared for him over the course of about 2 or 3 weeks. And she would come in and she would play her violin to ease his pain. And they actually ended up falling in love. But unfortunately, he didn't make it. He passed away. And then I think Beth, she didn't live very much longer either. She actually passed away from typhoid fever, I think. But room 403 is said to be haunted now. And sometimes you see her apparition or hear violin music. And we went and stayed, and I wanted so badly to hear some violin music, but we didn't hear anything or see anything.
What is the name of the inn again?
Martha Washington.
All right.
It was named after the good old first lady.
Yeah, right. The first lady.
Yeah, the first lady. And then, so that one's a well-known story around town. It's just romantic. It's a good ghost story, and the room is still there. You can go stay in it. But the second one that I really like from town is the Ghost Horse of Abingdon. And so when General Sherman was coming up and burning these major cities, they actually passed through Abingdon. And the people in Abingdon were so worried that they were going to burn it down. They were trying everything to appease the soldiers and not make a big stink of it, because a lot of the men that lived in Abingdon were off fighting the war. So when they leave, there's not a ton of protection. So they were actually kind of glad that some soldiers were posted up in Abingdon as kind of like a police force, but not really a police force. But when the Confederate soldiers came through, there was one soldier that was from Abingdon. And for some reason, General Sherman decided not to burn Abingdon to the ground. But this soldier that was marching through with the rest of them apparently had some kind of bad experience, or he left on a sour note, and he rode his horse up Main Street and actually ran in the courthouse and set it on fire and ran out. And then he got up on his horse, and he was kind of just sitting there watching it burn and laughing. And there was a few Union soldiers, or maybe some men from the town, I don't remember which, that chased him on his horse down Main Street, ended up shooting him in the back. And so he kind of falls, and his horse is dragging him. And I don't remember what actually happened to him, but now they say that you can see that horse, that ghost horse, on Main Street sometimes. Especially the Martha Washington has a really nice greenery property yard, I guess. A lot of people will say that they see it grazing there. As a matter of fact, I think it was like early 2000s. Somebody was driving through. There's an intersection right there on the corner. And somebody was driving through and ended up calling the police, because they were like, there's a horse loose on the lawn of the Martha Washington Museum, or not museum, the Martha Washington Hotel. Is that somebody's horse? So the police got in their car and they went down the street and they looked all around the hotel and they never could find it. But they say you can still see it running around sometimes. And I love that story.
Yeah, that's definitely, it's not often that you hear about like animals, ghosts of animals, but I know growing up, I know that the house that I grew up in, which was an old farmhouse in Illinois, and it was, because when we lived in it, this was in the 80s, it was 100 and something years old then. So it was
Wow.
built in like like late 1800s, probably.
Mhm.
Either way, I know I saw on multiple occasions a dog
Mm.
that didn't, I didn't have a dog.
Yeah.
I wanted a dog.
That's not my
Maybe
dog.
I just dreamt the dog. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
either way, something cool is on our way down to the Smoky Mountain Bigfoot what the heck is it called? Convention. We'll be driving through Abingdon. So I'm sure my wife will fall in love.
She will.
She loves places like that, like Leesburg, Tennessee, or Leesburg, Virginia,
Mhm.
things like that just have that old charm.
Yeah.
You know?
And you won't miss it. I mean,
No, we're
Martha
literally
Washington
driving
is-
through it. So
It's right there across from the Barter Theater. It's this beautiful, huge,
Oh, it is lovely.
really still original looking building. I mean, it's amazing. The library in there is amazing, and there's this huge wooden globe that they keep in the library, and it's right next. The library is right next to the front desk. It's like another room over, and if you ask the front desk, they have this binder of
Mhm.
ghost stories and ghost encounters that their guests have that will write down in this binder. So when we went, we were like, hey, can we see the binder? And they're like, yeah, sure. So they gave us the binder, and we took it into the library, and we're reading through all of these stories. And one of the stories was, and I was sitting like right in front of this thing. One of the stories was that the people that work there and sometimes guests will hear this wooden globe just start turning because it has this very distinct squeaky, how would you describe it, Mom? It was the weirdest sound.
It was a weird squeaky sound, but the main thing was when we went and tried to turn the globe. I mean, it takes
was
some
heavy.
effort.
yeah.
It's
turn-
wood and it's really, really heavy. And a lot of people, when they were working the front desk, had heard this sound.
Oh
and
man.
So they
So
go
you hear
over-
that, you're like, ooh.
Yeah. So they go next. They just go around the desk, go through the door. The wooden globe is right there. Nobody's in there. It's
Nobody's there.
completely still. And they would have to walk by the front desk to get
That
into
just
the
makes-
library.
That just makes it that much cooler.
It does. And we were there on Halloween weekend, and this was that night. They had a fire going in
Fire
the fireplace
going
in the
on.
library. We were the only ones in there. Lindsay's reading these stories out loud,
And
and
a
we both just
skeleton
turned
in
and
the
looked at
chair.
the globe.
It was kind of like I guess they had kind of decorated for Halloween because there was a skeleton that they had put in one of the chairs, and Mom didn't notice it at first.
That's
And she was like, Lindsay, was
amazing.
that there before? And I was like, I'm pretty sure it was.
That's amazing. Nope, it just appeared, Mom.
It just happened.
That's
But
amazing.
yeah, it was. And there's a ton of stories like that. I wish I could remember more from that binder, but like I said, they're in that episode if anybody wants to go check it out. We actually just got a comment. I don't know if you guys saw this. I texted
I did
you
see it
earlier.
after you.
We actually just got a comment on YouTube yesterday. We did like a room tour of room 403 when we got there, and somebody commented and they said, I'm staying in that room and I'm literally sitting on that couch watching this video right now. And I was like, oh, that's
awesome.
so cool.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have so my wife and I decided that we have an extra night that we need to stay someplace.
That'd be a
So
great.
maybe I'll take the drive back north and get us started back north
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
stay. I don't know if we can stay in room 403, but I could try.
You could try.
I could
It
try.
would
think
be
there's-
interesting. You guys in it, you can actually, you never know. It might be on an episode on your podcast.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. I'm always looking for material. Like, I mean, even today, I'm not a paranormal investigator. I know enough to get myself in trouble, right?
Mhm.
So I drove through a couple cemeteries today and did some EVPs, and I went to some places where I know people have actually passed away
Yeah.
Yeah.
and did EVPs, and I haven't gone through them yet, so we'll see. Yeah, I mean, I'm always looking to expand the repertoire, right? And
Mhm.
either get content, even if I just do like YouTube shorts or
Mm-hmm.
reels with the stuff. It's just, get out there and itch the scratch or scratch the itch. It's the scratch. What am I talking about?
If you've heard of something called the Sensible Tunnel, it's not far from there either.
Yeah.
You're like
Okay.
20, 25 minutes from there. And, there's rumors that place is really haunted. If you drive your car through it, turn it off, it won't start and all this other stuff. So
Handprints on
Wow.
I've been through it
windows.
before. I haven't really had any experiences, but it's still kind of cool. And there's a certain vibe that you get to it just because of how it's decorated and
Yeah.
all the graffiti and
Kind of out in the
everything
middle
in
of
it.
nowhere too,
But
isn't it?
that's something that you can go if you got an extra few minutes just to kind of go check out.
I love stuff that's out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Well, we have another haunted location that we can recommend. It's called the Nickerson Sneed House. And it's what, 20 minutes from Abingdon or 15, 20 minutes from Abingdon?
Yeah.
We did an episode there, and the lady that owns the home is part of a paranormal investigation group, and they often have, like, if
Bed
you're
and
staying
breakfast.
one weekend,
Yeah.
that you might be staying on a weekend when they're doing a seance or they're doing some kind of
I
investigation.
gotta move down south. So part of the reason that there's a lot of history up here in New York too, right? But it's
Mhm.
just it's cold all the time, and it's like you don't want to go
Yeah.
out. But my wife loves the hot. Well, we lived in North Carolina for a while,
Mhm.
but for some reason she's from here. We came back, but whatever. Either way, part of the reason I'm dragging her with me down there, I'm not dragging her. She wants to see what it's like because we're looking for places to possibly retire within
Mhm.
the next 3 to 5 years. So, man, I just, because
Not a bad area.
I've spent a lot of time in the Maryville area because I
Mhm.
have buddies down there, and there's just crazy stuff around there too. And
Uh-huh.
so it's like that whole corridor,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
just totally living up to its name.
It's just so old. Like it was just
Right. Everything.
established so
Yeah.
long ago. I mean, nothing compared to European towns, but like for America,
Oh, yeah.
pretty early.
I mean, even like people don't get it. Like, yeah, like Boston, there's so much stuff in like Massachusetts and
Mhm.
in New England, right? But at the end of the day, if you really think about it, a lot of the first settlers too were the whole eastern seaboard, and
Yeah.
so you have stuff going back to the 1600s
Mhm.
in Virginia and North Carolina and Georgia, especially.
Mhm.
And sometimes further back than just the settlers too.
Oh, for sure.
I know Abingdon was first Black's Fort when it was settled, but down the way where the Nickerson Sneed House is, Glade Spring, it used to be, it's called Passawatami in Cherokee because they called it This Is the Place, because Cherokee would come from miles to congregate here and socialize, and it was almost like some kind of ancient Olympics, like they would just celebrate and gather, and I think that's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's just very rich in history.
Mhm.
So,
And you got to get the lingo down. It's Merville.
Merville.
You got to put the U in it.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, we talk a little different down there.
Yeah, no, my daughter, she grew up, she's born and raised in Wilmington, and she has a heavy duty accent. My other daughters make fun of her all the time, and I'm just like, well, you guys have accents too that they make fun of when you go down there as well.
Yeah.
So,
Ron and I both went into the military.
And y'all.
yeah.
We do.
Military are moved around, up north or whatever. Like, hey, you got to say this word. You got to say that word.
Yeah. I didn't realize how thick of an accent I had until I went to basic training in 1988 at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and was in a platoon with a bunch of girls from Detroit and Chicago and Massachusetts. I mean, and they would just, I had to tell them, I was like, you are going to have to slow down. I cannot listen that fast. And then they would have all these phrases they would say, they'd come up and say, hey, McCoy, say this or say that. And I just went with it, I thought it was great.
So were you both in the Army?
We were.
Yeah. So I did a stint in the Marine Corps at Camp Lejeune. That's how I ended up in North Carolina.
Oh, okay.
So I was there. Yes,
thank
thank you
you.
guys for your service as well. And then I did 6 years in the Army. I got out of the Marines, was a cop for a bit, not built for it.
Yeah.
And then I joined the Army.
Uh-huh.
So I was a
Look at
Marine.
that.
The way I look at it is I was a Marine in the Army. But either way, then I got out of the Marine Corps, did some stuff for a while, and then I was an Air Force civilian. So I've been in all the daggone services. And then I worked for the VA for 7, 8 years. So
Wow.
yeah, I get it. I get it all. Yeah, good stuff, guys. So wait, where are we at? 9. So we're a little over an hour.
Lindsay,
Any more
did you have something about a bunny man or something you mentioned to us?
Well, I was gonna tell that story, but then I was like, I want to keep it more local to Appleton because there's just so many. There's so many that I could tell, but I'll just keep it
what
happy.
if I want to hear about the bunny man? Come on, bunny man. You can't say those words, bunny man, and then not follow through. Just saying.
Okay, so there is a legend, and this is more Northern Virginia, Fairfax County. There is a overpass, like a bridge tunnel situation called the Bunny Man Bridge, and this is said to have been haunted. And it all starts with, there's a ton of different versions, but the one that I know is Charles. Let me see if I can remember his name. Charles Holloman or Hollabin, I think. He and his wife and their little daughter were driving through, and he had been estranged for some time. I don't know what exactly happened, but he was taking them to see this new lodge that had been built by this nudist colony that he was a part of. And I know. Stay with me, okay?
I am. I'm here.
And so their car gets stuck in the mud around this lodge, around this tunnel. And he said that him and his wife had some kind of argument. His wife, Frances, had some kind of argument. And she took the baby and they walked off. So he spends the night in the car. And then when he gets up the next day, he hollers at some of his brothers to come help him search. They can't find her anywhere, so he reports her as missing. So then the police come and they conduct this search, and they actually find her in a shallow grave, and she had been severely beaten and shot in the head and the heart. And they also found June, their little daughter. She had been buried alive. So they were both deceased. So then, and this was in 1949, I think. In 1950 or 51, he finally goes to trial, and they end up convicting him of murder and sentencing him to the electric chair. And I think that was only the second time in Fairfax County that they had sentenced anyone to death. But the Virginia Supreme Court actually ended up overturning and appealing that. And he was sent to the where is it? I wrote it down. The Western State Hospital in Marion, Virginia, which is right down the road from me. Well, legend has it that he escaped. He broke out of this insane asylum. It's still there to this day. I think it's called something else now, but makes his way back up north. And at some point in the 70s, people started reporting that they were seeing this guy in this bunny costume. And it was like a popular place to go and park at that time because it was kind of out in the middle of nowhere, like a lover's lane kind of situation. And they started reporting that they were seeing this man in this bunny costume. And he would drag this axe around, and he would say, "You're trespassing, this is private property," and actually ended up throwing a hatchet through somebody's window. And the police even got involved. There are reports of this, documents on it, but he was never found. And legend has it now that you can go and you can park your car, and I don't know if it's at midnight or late at night, but if you say Bunny Man 3 times, it's supposed to conjure
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I have this book, Ghost Hunting Virginia. I have like a million of these books. And Michael J. Verhola, that wrote this book, and I hope I'm saying his name right, he actually went to Bunnyman Bridge with one of his friends, and they did it. They went at night. They said Bunnyman 3 times and took a bunch of pictures. And he said that after, when he was going through his pictures, most of them were just like pictures of the tunnel, but there was a couple of pictures that you can see this really bright orb in one of them, and then the second one you can see a whole group of orbs, and you can actually make out a face in one of them, and it's like a male face. And so he's like, I don't know if I conjured him or not, maybe. I mean, you can take that with a grain of salt, because
It was
orbs can
probably
be
Candyman and Bloody Mary
Yeah.
were there with him too.
I know.
It was
I
all the
know.
orbs.
Bloody
It's
Mary.
just a really
Just start
it's
saying,
a weird
yeah.
story.
Start saying all the things.
Just conjure everything. Yeah, just
Conjure
conjure
'em all.
anybody. It's
Bring 'em
just a
all.
really weird story.
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
really is.
It's
No,
sad
like I'm
too.
so bizarre, like with
Yeah.
the like just random with the wife and the baby
Yeah.
getting buried. Like
Oh, that's so sad.
it
like,
is
we
sad,
start
but
out
it's
with the
like,
nudist
but
colony.
where did we go with that? So
Yeah.
I mean, what was there overwhelming evidence that he did it, or you know what I mean? Like I'd like to, yeah. I mean, and it only happened in the 40s, so it's not like
Mhm.
forever ago.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think rumors really started playing up in the 70s about this bunny man.
Yeah.
Go to the bridge and conjure him, and I think mainly it's kept alive by like teenagers that like to scare
Probably,
themselves
right?
that way.
But like,
Urban
you know,
legend.
superstitious stuff like that is awesome. I mean, and you know, I mean, like you've got stories like that. Like so I hear Bunny Man, but like, you know, you have Goat Man, and you've got
Yeah.
all
the
these
Goat Man
stories
Boy.
across,
Yeah.
you know, from wherever, and that goes back centuries, right?
Mhm.
Like, so but you know, this stuff all came from something in some way.
Yes.
So who knows, right?
That's one thing we found, that a lot of your stories like that had a shred of truth in the beginning,
Yes.
and they stemmed
Absolutely.
from something, like you said.
And a lot of them came from the old world. So
Mm-hmm.
you have a lot of the same stories
Yeah.
that just get transplanted over here.
Right.
Right. It's like the whole, you know, Brothers Grimm book just got repositioned into America,
Yeah.
and all those tall tales and folk tales and scary tales just, you know, take hold. It's
Mhm.
but it's cool. But again, in Appalachia, you guys have some weird stuff. No, I'm just saying that just happens, like stuff that doesn't happen other places, right?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So especially when you start getting into, yeah, like you said, those hollers, man. There's
Mhm.
some of them are scary places. It can be
Yeah, and places
scary.
like
It's a whole universe on
Yeah.
itself.
you
Mhm.
said, I heard you say something. Why did they name it Booger Ridge? And it was
Right.
because it's such a remote, dark place. You know, it's this 2-lane road,
Right.
and you could go for miles and miles without seeing a house, but you would see bears. You would see, I mean, any
Yeah.
number of things at
Right.
night. So that's why they called it Booger Ridge.
Absolutely. I mean, and also you have no idea where these names come from sometimes, right? So,
Yeah.
oh my goodness. And nowadays, booger has a totally different connotation.
Yeah.
Right?
True.
So,
Yeah.
And things get bigger and like get disproportionate there. I mean, you know, like the bears and snakes and things are larger. I've seen black snakes stretch completely across the 2-lane road, which is like 15, 18 foot,
yeah, right.
and
Yeah.
a foot on each side hanging off. And then, you know, a good sized bear print is about like that. But
Mhm.
around Booger Ridge, my dad and brother happened to be around there one day. And my brother himself personally, and I said, that's why I know, you know, it's a firsthand account. He said that he put 2 hands.
Yeah.
Inside it.
And I mean, things just, they're different there.
They grow
Yeah.
big up there.
They do. No, it's
Because they're
you know,
undisturbed and they can.
undisturbed. Plus, it's like the perfect ecosystem
Yeah.
for that type of stuff. That's why, you know, I think there's, you know, because you get into there, especially like Yeah, like, well, not far from you guys in the upper Tennessee there. I mean, you get dogman stuff going, and that terrifies me.
Does it?
I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing like, oh, I'll go check out the big 12-foot, upright walking hominid ape. No problem. But as soon
Yeah.
as you put a dog head on it, it's like, man, like it just
Yeah.
hits me. There's like something primal there that's just like,
Yeah.
I don't want to mess with any of that, but I don't.
And there are
Seems-
still people in the area that kind of adhere to and practice like granny witchery and those old healing
Yep.
rituals and stuff. Yeah.
Some
It's
of the
an interesting
stories,
area.
some of the stories of like, well, I guess it's not really fair to call them that, but some country folk they're like feral. Like
Yeah.
that's not they're living by different rules and different
True.
things out when you get way out there.
Yeah.
And that's those stories of feral people, or some of the stories of like cults that like detach themselves, and you're talking 4 or 5 miles from the nearest road, and somebody just stumbles across a town, and you're like, wait, what? They're all wearing white, they're all doing there's multiple stories of stuff like this. Just saying. And it gets, there's stuff going on again there that just you don't hear the stories other places.
Right.
So,
doesn't it make you want to come and live?
yes, because I love the high strangeness. Like you know what it is, and I've studied this quite a bit, like with ley lines and things, right? You also down there, maybe a little farther south there, you get into the 33rd parallel, and that's another animal. It's a whole nother couple of episodes.
Yeah.
But things along those mountain lines, right? The areas, they get thin, is what I like to say. The spaces get very thin. So I feel like there's it's just more active on it. Like the veil is thinner.
The veil is thinner, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I just don't, there's no other explanation for it.
And in some places you can actually feel it, like in the atmosphere or what have you. There's so many places that we want to go do on site, episodes, so many locations just that are within driving distance.
Yeah, right. And it's just awesome. You guys will do it. You'll get there. It's awesome.
It reminds me, have you ever seen the movie Pumpkinhead?
Oh yeah, I mean, partly. I do remember it back in the day. I just remember being pretty hokey, but I do remember.
That's right.
It reminds me because, like I said, speaking of the holler and folklore and stuff, and you talk about people, kind of like what we talk about.
Yeah.
Them being able to say certain things and do certain things that's not the normal. When you say, hey, you need to go here and talk to this particular person. That's what they do, like your witch doctors or your, or your witches or your spell catchers or whatever. That movie kind of sets it up because it's this freaky old lady way, way back in the woods, and she does certain things that can.
Yeah, I don't remember. I just wrote it down, so I'll rewatch it just so you know, and then I'll report back.
Yeah.
We need to have you on as a guest on our.
Oh, sure. Anytime you guys want. What it makes me think of is even though it's not Appalachia, but like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the kind of weird setup that they have.
Yeah.
I just hear about people disappearing
and
stuff like that. Doesn't need to be nefarious necessarily. Well, it probably is, but you know what I mean? Like, oh, man.
Yeah, it would be really easy to disappear.
Yeah, for sure. Well, my wife is like, I don't care what you do as long as you come home. So she's always like, don't don't get stolen out of the woods or something.
Yeah.
Crazy thing that whenever I first started dating my ex-wife, she wanted to know, and even though she lived 35, 40 minutes away from where I was raised on the mountain, it's a completely different world from there to my house. So we start going up this mountain, and we keep going up and up and up and up. And then, later on after the fact, I took her up there to meet the family, and she goes, I was terrified. She goes, we kept going up that place. She goes, I didn't know if you was going to go up there and you was going to like kill me or, like the movie Wrong Turn or something.
Yeah, right.
When you said you live in the
You
sticks,
watched a lot of scary movies. You guys weren't telling stories when you said that.
Yeah.
We do. We love some scary movies.
But I thought that was funny. I was like, no, she goes, you lived there. I was like, yeah, my whole life. She goes, that's crazy.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, guys, I could probably sit here all night, but we should probably wrap it up. So with that being said, thank you for coming on. And tell us where we can find you guys.
Lindsay, take it away.
Oh, I was about to say, Mom, take it away.
Oh, I can.
You're good at that part.
Okay. Well, we are on the socials. We are Sirens of the Supernatural on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And then over on TikTok, we are at Supernatural Sirens. We welcome emails with listener stories or ideas, and our Gmail is real easy to remember. It's sirensofthesupernatural@gmail.com. So give us a like and a shout out on our socials, or send us an email. We don't have a website just yet, but maybe someday we will.
Yeah.
But that's where you can find us. And we love listeners. We love the spooky and paranormal. We've built a kind of a sirens team that's more than just us out there. So we love hearing from listeners and followers.
Awesome. Yeah. Where what's your favorite social?
TikTok.
Okay. Well, it's where you guys have the most followers too.
We do, yeah.
So it kind of
TikTok or
shows.
Instagram. We don't get a lot of traction on Facebook. I think Facebook is,
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's Facebook.
It's Facebook. It's been around forever. I think people are always looking for something.
Yeah.
New
At
and
the end of the
more
day,
hip.
though, everything gets posted from Instagram to Facebook anyway. So
Yeah.
just wondering.
Yeah.
Everybody's got their thing. I actually like. I like Instagram, but I like YouTube. So
Yeah, we like YouTube.
I watch more YouTube than anything. So
Yeah. Who would have thought back in the day when we were
No.
growing up, you could stream anything at any time?
Right, absolutely, about everything. Right?
Yes.
The whole world, right here.
Yep, right there.
All right, guys, I really appreciate you coming on, and
Thank you for having
Thank
us.
you.
and I will put everything in the show notes and all the stuff.
We
All the
appreciate
fun
it.
things. Absolutely.
Thank you. It's nice to meet you.
You too.
I got bad thoughts that make my mind scared. Hold me hostage and they don't fight fair. Who gon' pray for me and wipe on my tears? Who gon' save me if you not right here? Move this darkness and make my sight clear. Take me your way cause I don't like here. Ghosts of my past, they feeling the night air. Wake me up, I'm trapped in my nightmares. Wake me up, I'm trapped in my nightmares. Drowning, I'm off the deep end. Apparitions of all my demons. All my thoughts are committing treason. All alone, who gon' hear me screaming? Manifestations of my fears. Regrets that stretched out for light years. Can almost touch the light, homie, it's right there. Body free, but trapped in my nightmares. Wake me up, don't let me drown. All the lights are